Chris, you just finished your NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship draft. You drafted on Monday. Tell us, how did you do?
I was really happy with it. It wasn't like I got any crazy bargains or anybody slipped to me that shocked me, but overall I felt pretty good. I took C.J. Spiller with the 6th overall pick. That, in some ways, was sort of my hardest pick to make. I hadn't really planned for what would happen if Jamal Charles and Doug Martin and a couple other guys I thought might slip were gone. But I went C.J. Spiller narrowly over Trent Richardson. And then the rest of the draft mostly fell into place. In round 2, and this is the one that is kind of weird for me, I took Maurice Jones-Drew over both Julio Jones and Demaryius Thomas, and that's not what I usually do.
Okay, very good. Let's pull up your roster, and we'll take a look at your team, and we'll see exactly how this worked out for you here. We'll start off with the draft grid in the first half of that draft, starting off with first few rounds. You got the first 6 teams. Pulling that up right now. You see, and you can see you're drafting in the 6th spot. This wasn't a choice. This is kind of just how it just worked out for you there.
It's called neglect. I was supposed to set my preferences, and I just forgot until it was too late. I was in Vegas, and I was aghast when I woke up and I saw that my pick had been assigned to me. But the truth is, I think the default of your selecting where you select in the NFFC, this is the $100,000 online NFFC draft, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I got 6th, I couldn't have been in the top 5, and most likely I was lower down than that. So I probably wouldn't have gotten to that much better slot anyway.
Right, exactly. And, it worked out pretty well for you, I think. Especially in 3rd round reversal, you're not really missing out on a whole lot there. So there's that. Now, I think the tough choice for me would have been if you would have had to, if Charles fell back and you're choosing between Charles and Spiller, or if Megatron fell back because everyone is so hot and heavy after running back. Say if Richardson went 5, then you might have had a real decision on your hands.
Yeah, it's funny, like your first pick, you'd think you'd know who you're taking, but if I had Calvin at 6 possibly in a PPR league with 3 receivers, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. I might have taken him, and I really just had this Richardson feeling. I was like, he says he's healthy now, and Norv Turner is just such a, he's a horrible head coach, but for running backs, he's great. I mean, you look at LaDainian Tomlinson, he's the architect of that all-time great fantasy career. Emmitt Smith, maybe the greatest all-time fantasy back. He was the coach there. I mean, he's the offensive coordinator there. He was the guy when Stephen Davis went off, Terry Allen. There are a lot of backs that had huge seasons with Norv Turner, and Richardson's going to get every bit of work so long as he's healthy, whereas Spiller, I think he's going to get 250, 275 carries, which is enough with the guy who's that efficient, plus catches passes, but he's not the guaranteed workhorse that Richardson is.
That's right. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at your 2nd round pick. Pull up your draft again. You went Maurice Jones-Drew 2, Chris Johnson 3. We've talked on the air a little bit about how I'm uneasy with those 2 guys, yet I understand the mentality in picking both of them. Chris Johnson in particular is the one that I think is going to draw a lot of attention. Tell us more about your thought process with Chris Johnson.
Well, to me, he really slid. I mean, I see him as, once the first round's done, and we're talking about a PPR league, and you're in the early 2nd, do you take Jimmy Graham? Do you take one of those elite receivers like, Des Bryant, Demaryius Thomas, Brandon Marshall? Or do you take Chris Johnson? Like, that was kind of where I had him just because he does everything. I mean, catches passes. He, I don't know if he'll loosen goal line carries to Sean Green. Maybe. I don't know if Sean Green's a backup or a timeshare. Not really sure. And even if he starts off as a timeshare, he may end up as a backup because he's so bad. But Chris Johnson still break the big play after 4 terrible games to start the season last year. He had a very nice stretch of about 10 or 11 games where he's averaging 4.9 yards per carry. With the improved offensive line, the quarterbacking, it could be better. It's not going to be worse. I promise that. I think that there's still a lot of upside. He's still young. He's still very fast, and knock on wood, he's been very durable to date in his career.
There's a lot of talk about this draft pool that wide receivers are pretty deep. You kind of proved that by waiting to the 4th round to take a receiver, still ending up with Jordy Nelson and Torrey Smith, your top 2 wide receivers, getting Denario Alexander in the 8th as your 3rd receiver, Denarius Moore in the 10th round, another possible number 1 receiver for his team. Tell us more about your wide receiving crew.
Yeah, don't forget Sidney Rice. Percy Harvin today just turned out he has some hip injury that who knows, And then if he's gone, Sidney Rice is the number 1 receiver probably in Seattle too.
Until he gets hurt.
Until he gets hurt. But he did stay healthy all last year, so that was encouraging. But you're right, he's very injury prone. So is Denario Alexander, so is Denarius Moore. But I got two guys I really liked, in Jordy Nelson, who, we can quibble whether he's the number 1 or number 2 in Green Bay, but either way, he's good for double-digit touchdowns if he plays 16 games. Rodgers likes to throw that back shoulder fade to him in the end zone. He's pretty big also. He also makes the big plays, and Rodgers has the best, arguably one of the top 2 or 3 arms in the league. So love Jordy Nelson. Torrey Smith, only game in town there. Bolden's gone. Pitta, Smith, and I think Ray Rice are going to get 70% of the targets in Baltimore, so there should be plenty to go around there. And that's why I did go 3 running backs, is because I knew that receiver was deep, and I've been in a bunch of mocks and 12-team drafts where I've taken receivers early, and I'm looking at what guys are getting in rounds 3, 4, and 5 on the receivers, and it's making me sick. So I just felt like, I'm going to take running backs, and there will be receivers there, and I found that there were.
Very good. Pulling up your roster one more time, and people can check this out at RotoWire.com. Just go to the blog section. You can see Chris's blog item. You can see your chance to beat me in the RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship. Just go ahead and click through, sign up. $350 entry fee, chance to win $100,000. You waited to the 7th round. You got your wide receiver. Your quarterback and Andrew Luck. You got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was going to wait even longer on quarterback. 12-team league, everybody's going to get a good quarterback, you would think, although a couple guys did double up in 7th and 8th round, and there are 1 or 2 teams that got shut out of those top 12 quarterbacks. But for me, I thought I'm going to wait till round 9. I'll still get Tony Romo or whoever. But Josh Gordon went, who I really like. I don't care about 2-game suspension in a 12-team league. It's very easy to replace him. Dennis Pitta went right before me. That was the last tight end I really cared about. So now the last receiver I cared about, last tight end I cared about was gone. I already had 4 running backs. I took Ahmad Bradshaw in round 6. So it was like, okay, I'm just going to get my favorite quarterback left on the board, which is Luck. The reason I like Luck, besides his star pedigree, the fact that he's in his 2nd season and could just take a huge leap, is he may be the only quarterback in the league who you can project for 600 attempts and maybe 3-4 rushing touchdowns, at least 250 rushing yards. Almost nobody gets that many attempts and rushing yards. Usually it's one or the other. The only other guy who kind of could do that is Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers only throws typically 520, 550 times. Luck is the only guy who I think can maybe throw 600 times with a really bad defense and still get his rushing totals too. What
was your toughest decision in the draft?
Pick 1. That was my toughest decision. I kind
Shouldn't
of
that always be the case? It's the most important one, right?
It shouldn't, and it shouldn't. Usually you think that you could plot out what's likely going to happen. It'll either be this guy or that guy, and maybe it's pretty easy to plan in advance. What your choices are going to be. Whereas in round 5, you have no idea what your choice is going to be until it gets there. So maybe I was a little lax in actually having a firm idea what I was going to do. But I really could have gone. It was really Trent Richardson or Spiller, and it's funny because we had Pianowski on the radio today, and he was like, "Oh, I'd go Ray Rice, no question." And once he said that, I was like, yeah, in a PPR, that's actually, I don't know why that didn't even really occur to me. I guess, I don't know. That was perfectly legitimate, too. So any one of those 3 guys would have been fine.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Ideally, if you were setting your Kentucky Derby style setting, you're setting your draft pick for your first round, what slot do you want to be in?
I think I might go 8 because I think I can still get Richardson or Rice or Spiller, one of those guys, or worst case Calvin Johnson if everyone goes running backs. And then you pick earlier in both the 2nd and 3rd rounds. I think 8th would be my pick.
All right, very good, very good. Hey, anything else you want to talk about with your draft before we move on to baseball?
Not much. I just kind of felt like there were a lot of receivers to get deeper into the draft, and I got LaMichael James, who's the guy I'm going to have pretty much everywhere. And don't take it. These guys are taking defenses. Someone took a defense in like the 10th round, Seattle's defense. I got Pittsburgh in round 20. It's a 12-team league. Don't be ridiculous.
Very good, very good. I have to say I'm bummed out about the Percy Harvin news, not because I own him, but because I wasn't going to own him. That's if I feel like I'm going to be the league is going to overdraft him by 2 or 3 rounds, I want that to happen. I want them to create that inefficiency. That's one less player that's going to slip to me now.
Right. You mean right? Someone would have taken him. You wouldn't have wanted him anyway. You would have got somebody else. Now they may actually take a player you like in round 2 instead of Harvin. Totally agree. But now that I do have Rice in a very high stakes league, I'm not that upset about it.
I can't blame you at all. Okay, let's talk about another form of high stakes. Let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about the Biogenesis suspensions. You didn't get a chance to share your take on Ryan Braun earlier until today and to Thursday's radio show. The news happened on Monday. I was totally wrong on this. I thought, hey, he was going to be suspended at some point in time, but I thought he's going to fight it. Look at the public posturing he did. Look at that awful press conference. In retrospect, it's a really awful press conference that he gave. Now, all of a sudden, no appeal, no fight, taking his medicine. You know, I totally whiffed on that one. I
Taking his
traded for
medicine, I
him
like
and
that
everything.
pun.
What's that?
I said I like the taking his medicine pun.
Yeah, you know what? That was a total unintentional pun too. That's the worst.
So look, here's my take on it, and it's kind of like Braun's like, I'm innocent. I'll show you. Oh, you have the goods on me? Okay, I'll settle. You know, it's like I'll posture like crazy until I see what kind of hand you have, and then I'll fold. Right? I mean, and I do think that the way this whole thing played out was like a poker game. You know, basically these guys are incentivized to take drugs, do really well, get a huge contract, and if they get busted, they get busted. It's like a flush draw where you have odds to call. You got to call. You got to take the drug. You got to, you know, they're incentivizing you to, the pot's big enough that, hey, if you lose a little money, the pot was so big I had to, you know, had to put my chips in. And, you know, and this is the same thing. Then he was bluffing, and then he got called on it, and he realized that MLB had the goods, so he folded, and he served the suspension. Two takeaways. One is, you know, people were awfully cavalier at the beginning of the year about how, oh, this will never happen. I mean, you were like that. You made a trade, you know, mid-season. You got a discount on him. But, I mean, the beginning of the year, taking him in the top three was a little bit crazy, and everyone just dismissed that anything would possibly happen. Two, you know, it was also these things don't happen in a vacuum. I mean, he obviously settled in part because MLB had the goods, probably because he was getting a lot less money this year, so it cost him a lot less in salary than if he got it last year. And three, because it probably went down a little bit better with his organization that's now out of the hunt rather than fighting it and then being a liability, someone you couldn't trade or somebody who's actually hurting the team by being suspended next year. So there are a lot of good reasons for him to do it now. The wider context is kind of, you know, we talked about this on the radio, whether, you know, Braun's to blame, the fact that there's incentives to cheat are to blame, or whether just the whole, you know, BS line of society where, you know, the Marlins are defrauding the public on the stadium and making money that way, and they turn around and they tell these players, oh, don't try to get ahead, don't try to cheat, don't cut corners, be honest, and don't. It just seems very disingenuous to send that message.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, Frank McCourt owns a half of a parking lot in Boston. Right. You know, is the slumlord for the Dodgers and turns that into billions. And you know, it's frustrating. You know, hey, he should be, you know, he could be touted as a success story. Really, if you think about it, I mean, he totally defrauded everybody, but hey, he came out and clean on the other side. Yeah, who cares? He had a divorce, whatever. But you know, aside from the moral obligations, I see your point a lot there. I mean, you look at Jeffrey Lurie and the Marlins; it happens all the time.
Well, that's the question. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just saying, should we really be looking at Braun through this moral lens? Like, there's all these really important rules, and he skirted one of them, or just the fact that, like, in society, like, people lobby to change the rules they don't like all the time, break them. If you have enough power and wealth, you don't really have to suffer for breaking them. And it's more like a poker game where there's risk and there's reward, and you kind of, it's the cost of doing business, right? I mean, these banks, they cheat, they defraud the investors, they do stuff. Oh, they get a $500 million fine. Hey, it's cost of doing business. You know, is Braun getting this suspension after getting this contract and winning an MVP? Is this just the cost of doing business? You know, I mean, if that's the way it's looked at, it's not really a moral thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, he didn't get there on his flush draw. He loses the pot. But you know, but if you want to make a moral thing out of it, then I think we have to make it wider than just Ryan Braun. We got to include the ownership, the structure of baseball that allowed this to happen, and then, you know, sort of a wider societal problem where, you know, where there's this hypocrisy going on, you know, generally. So. You know,
the nature of man. You have to take it all the way to the top, dude. I mean, it's just people are dishonest. They're always looking for an edge.
Well, no, but it's that
very Hobbesian.
Well, no, I mean, it's whether we're a nation of laws or a nation of people. I mean, that's the thing. It's not really that everyone. There is human nature to cheat and get ahead, but, like, you know, when people get caught, when they do get caught, you know, are we actually punishing them? You know, are people who are lying under oath? You know, the director of national intelligence lies under oath. No big deal. He's a big shot. He's not getting in trouble. You know. A little guy lies under oath, he'll go to jail. You know, if we're actually about the law, then we can start saying, okay, there was a letter of the law. You're not allowed to take these substances. Ryan Braun broke the law, broke the rule. It's not just that he loses money and that's the result. It's he's bad. He did wrong. You know, apparently Jeff Passan had an article and a couple other guys that he really screwed some people and lied and screwed up other people who were actually telling the truth about his drug use. And so that, you know, that's like takes another, you know, when you're starting to harm other people, it takes it to a different level. But you know, insofar as he used steroids, it's kind of like, all right, he's suspended. Who else is going to be suspended? Is it going to be Nelson Cruz? Is it going to be Bartolo Colon? You know, is it going to be Johnny Peralta? Who's next?
Yeah, and probably any one of those. I'm surprised the hammer hasn't dropped yet. The other question is, do these guys appeal? I mean, I would have thought that Braun would have been one of the last to not fight it, but it turns out he was the first to cave in instead. And for maybe the reasons that you mentioned, maybe because of his injury, maybe because his contract next year is bigger, maybe because the Brewers are out of it. All these things probably apply. What happens when Nelson Cruz name comes up? I mean, maybe he's not so irreplaceable that the Rangers don't just say, go ahead, take this suspension. I don't know. It depends also how long the suspension is, how many, because this is his first offense. But then again, he didn't test positive. It's outside of that sphere of, like, this is the structure of how long your suspension is. It's a little different.
Yeah, and Braun they really wanted to go after because he kind of beat the rap. And the way, I think he was a particularly pernicious example. I think those other guys, yeah, they cheated to get ahead, but there wasn't any of the other baggage that came with it. So we'll see. I mean, I don't see how they can't go after them. There's probably some names we don't know, right? I mean, we have, like I said, Peralta, Colon, Nelson Cruz. Those are three big ones. But, what if Robbie Cano is involved? I mean, that's a huge name.
Right, of course. Especially in his walk year, no less, too.
Right.
That's the thing that's kind of crazy about that.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to impugn any of these guys, until the evidence comes out. It may be nothing, and it may not be the case, but I do think it's fair as fantasy owners, at the very least, to just kind of suspect everybody on your team and to be like, who could possibly be the next guy? Someone pointed out, Ryan Braun is 6'2", 200. He doesn't look like a steroid guy. He doesn't look like Barry Bonds, at age 38 with a head the size of the beach ball. He doesn't look like Sammy Sosa or McGuire. He looks like a normal, 6'2", 200. That's that's a normal 1980s power hitter.
They come in all sizes and packages. Manny Alexander was one of the first. Alex Sanchez was the very first guy to test positive under the testing program for the Rays. You remember that guy, a little punch and Judy hitter. Right. One of the names on there is Everth Cabrera, who is nobody's idea of a power hitter. Pitchers have been tested positive all over the place. It comes in all sorts of forms, and you get Bartolo. 2.5 miles an hour on that fastball. That's enough to be the difference between a fill-in reliever and a closer, or a AAA pitcher and a major leaguer. I mean, that's a big difference.
Yeah, if Cologne is involved, I mean, it clearly doesn't, guarantee you a sculpted body. That's for sure.
Yeah. Does the phrase "too big to fail" apply to him?
Yeah, the thing about him is, just think about how he'd be if he wasn't on roids. Thank God. There probably would have been an earthquake. The thing is, though, we will see what happens. And what do you do? I mean, how do you handicap this as an owner? Is it just the simple, hey, if you're in first place, you trade those guys for 80 cents on the dollar. If you're in fifth place, you buy them for 80 cents on the dollar and say, I'm going to take a chance that they appeal and don't get suspended?
Well, the caveat that I was utterly wrong last time, I'm very hesitant to issue advice here. But yeah, I think you have to assume some of these guys are going to start serving their suspension now. I think more so like with a hitter that plays every day, like a Nelson Cruz, you might be able to get some value. I mean, it's going to be really hard to trade Bartolo Colon right now, isn't it? I mean, what sort of value are you going to get for him?
It would have been hard anyway, even if he didn't have his issue, because no one really believes that this is for real.
Right, and he doesn't give you strikeouts anyhow.
Right. And pitching, for a few starts is so volatile. I mean, it would be hard to predict that he won't have a 4.20 ERA, the rest of the way, or a league average. I wouldn't say that you were. I mean, you were only wrong about Braun to the extent you were cavalier about. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that's the way to think about it. But if you just simply thought there was a small chance it would happen, but you're going to get him for 80 or 90 cents on the dollar, and it was worth it. Just because you're wrong in the result doesn't make you wrong in the process. And I think you could still give advice on what you would do. I think I would trade for all. I think I would trade for all of these guys if they were, if I got the right discount. My experience is that there's a huge bias among fantasy players of not making a sin of commission in a trade. They rather make a sin of omission, meaning they'd rather stand pat with what they have and lose than risk, making a bold trade and lose because you did that when you would have won if you stood pat. It's much more painful to give away the title because you did something rather than not to have won the title because you didn't do something.
Yeah, I think the calculus changes when you're in a money spot already, first, second, or third, and on pretty solid footing, versus a team that needs to get in, make some moves to make it happen, too. I mean, you have to take some chances. Try to buy Nelson Cruz at 65 cents on the dollar. Offer Diane Viciedo for Nelson Cruz. See what happens.
I'll say something else, too. If you're trading, I always find the teams that are in 7th, 8th, 9th place that I trade really easily. I mean, who cares? Yeah. I mean, you've got a 2% chance or a 5% chance to run the table and win. I mean, are you really going to be uptight? Hey, if you like this guy, if there's a player you don't have, you kind of want it all year, fits a slot, they want somebody, it might be a bad deal, but it's within reason. I'll do it. Don't you feel like that? Like in June, July, you got teams that aren't doing that well. there's a trade that kind of makes sense. It's a player you kind of want to own. You think he could blow up, and you just say yes.
Right, and the case for making more trades is pretty obvious too. If you feel like you're better at evaluating the player pool than your opponents, every trade you make, you're gaining a cent or two on the dollar. Make more trades. Period.
Right.
Now you're going to miss on a couple of them, but by volume, that's the way you're going to gain 20 cents as opposed to gaining 2 or 3 cents on the dollar. And that's what you need to go from 7th or 8th or 9th to get up into the money spots.
Yeah, or also to buy volatility. I mean, I traded for David Price in labor when he was hurt. He could have been out for the year. You know, all the time the guy's out 2 months and he doesn't come back.
Right.
But it was just high volatility, and the guys I gave up, you know, they were okay. I'm kind of annoyed that Miguel Gonzalez has just gone on this tear the second I gave him up, but it's okay. Price has been very good. You know, I'll just make that trade because of the volatility. I needed the volatility.
Right. Exactly right. So yeah, and it's an interesting play to go out and go and do that, and actually the execution of doing that too. You got to be aggressive. You got to go out and make those offers left and right, and you're going to get turned down a lot. And the only problem with the volume method is there's a finite number of people in the league you can trade with. After a while, they're going to like, stop. I don't want to trade with you anymore. I mean, you're going to have to deal with that. You do it. You keep offering anyhow, and I appreciate that out of you. But not everybody is going to kind of play in your game. That's the one tricky part.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've slowed down in friends and family. I was giving out a lot of offers, but I balanced the team the way I wanted it to be balanced, and now my guys just aren't hitting. Come on. You know, Stanton, Hayward, they're back. They're healthy. Okay, I'm making my big push. I have Puig. I have Dominic Brown. Everybody's going cold at once. You know, it's like, come on. I was just ready to make my big move.
Yeah, well, the world's crying for you there. Yeah. You still got time. 2.5 months left.
No, I still think I'll make a move, but you know, it would have been nice to do it last month, and you know, now I'm looking at 3rd, 4th rather than 1st. But you never know. There's still a lot of time left.
Still tight pack at the top. You could, you know, it's like 5 points separate the top 6 people. So if you get into that group and you in the leaders pack, you got a chance.
Yeah.
So, and since I'm in that leaders pack, I can talk down to you like that right now.
All right, just look at the career records in that league.
I know. I'm aware of that. You're having a rough year. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. That's all I'm saying.
At your leisure, peruse them, if you will.
At my leisure, I will.
All right.
That'll do it for another edition this week. Chris and I will be back again next week. In 2 weeks, I'll be doing my NFFC draft, so we can talk about that. Good luck in your leagues. Check out Chris's blog. Thanks for watching.